Let's begin with something deceptively simple: fatigue. Not the kind you feel after a long day of honest work. Not the satisfying exhaustion that follows effort and meaning. I'm talking about the kind that lingers. The kind that greets you in the morning before your feet even touch the floor. When your thyroid begins to underperform, the shift is rarely dramatic. It doesn't announce itself with catastrophe. It whispers. You start waking up tired. You need more caffeine. Your thoughts feel just slightly slower, as though there's a thin veil between you and clarity. You brush it off. You tell yourself you're busy. You're stressed. You're aging. You adapt. And that's the real danger: adaptation. Human beings are remarkably good at normalizing dysfunction. If your energy drops by 5% this month and another 5% the next, you don't notice the slope. You only notice that life feels heavier. Tasks require more willpower. Conversations demand more effort. You stop volunteering ideas. You stop pushing yourself physically. You begin negotiating with your own potential. The thyroid, small as it is, regulates metabolic pace. It determines how efficiently your cells convert oxygen and nutrients into usable energy. When it slows, everything slows: your muscles, your digestion, your cognition. You may experience brain fog that makes you question your competence. You may feel unmotivated and quietly ashamed of it. And here's where the psychological weight compounds the biological one. Instead of asking, "What is happening physiologically?" you ask, "What's wrong with me?" You interpret exhaustion as laziness. You frame reduced output as moral failure. That misinterpretation erodes confidence. But biology is not a character flaw. If you've been living in a state of persistent, unexplained fatigue, that is not a trivial complaint. It is data. It is your body signaling that its regulatory systems may be misaligned. And if you ignore that signal long enough, you begin building a life around diminished capacity, choosing less because you feel like less. The question you must confront is this: are you truly exhausted from life, or is your body struggling to generate the energy life requires? Because if it's the latter, then the solution isn't self-criticism, it's investigation. And you owe it to yourself to find out whether the tired version of you is the real you, or just a warning sign you've been ignoring. Now let's move a layer deeper, because once energy begins to falter, metabolism quietly follows. And metabolism is not just about weight, it is about how efficiently you transform the raw materials of life into usable fuel. When the thyroid shifts out of balance, the body's internal thermostat changes with it. You may find yourself gaining weight despite eating the same way you always have. Or perhaps the opposite happens: weight drops without intention, and your heart feels like it's running ahead of you. Your hands and feet are constantly cold. Your skin becomes dry. Your hair thins. For women, menstrual cycles become irregular or heavier. These are not random inconveniences. They are coordinated biological signals. But here's where the psychological trap appears. Instead of asking why the body is changing, most people respond with control. They restrict calories more aggressively. They double their workouts. They push harder. And when the scale doesn't cooperate, they interpret it as a failure of discipline. That interpretation can become corrosive. Because if effort increases and results decrease, the conclusion often becomes, "There must be something wrong with me." Yet the thyroid governs the rate at which every cell uses energy. If that rate slows, fat storage increases even with modest intake. If it accelerates, weight may fall despite adequate nutrition. You cannot outwork a misfiring endocrine system. Biology always sets the boundary conditions for willpower. And that matters philosophically, because self-respect depends on accurate self-assessment. If you misidentify a physiological imbalance as a moral weakness, you distort your self-concept. You begin fighting yourself instead of investigating the system. The body whispers before it screams. Slight weight changes, subtle intolerance to cold, puffiness in the face, brittle nails. These are early data points. Ignore them, and the imbalance compounds. Pay attention, and you intervene before chaos sets in. Your metabolism is not your enemy. It is a reflection of regulatory harmony, or the lack of it. So the real question becomes this: are you punishing yourself for changes your hormones are orchestrating behind the scenes? Because if you're waging war against your own body without understanding it, you're fighting the wrong battle. And clarity, not self-blame, is where real control begins. And now we arrive at perhaps the most misunderstood dimension of all, the emotional and psychological consequences. Because when the thyroid drifts out of balance, it doesn't merely alter energy or metabolism. It alters perception, it shifts mood, it changes the lens through which you interpret reality. You might notice anxiety that seems disproportionate to your circumstances, a low, persistent sadness that doesn't respond to positive thinking, irritability that surprises even you, or a strange emotional flatness, as if the color has drained slightly from experience. These shifts can be subtle at first. You may still function, you may still meet your obligations, but internally, something feels misaligned. The thyroid interacts closely with neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the chemical systems that regulate motivation, reward, and emotional stability. When thyroid hormones fluctuate, those systems can destabilize. And because the symptoms resemble primary mood disorders, many people assume the problem is purely psychological. So they search for explanations in their character. They question their resilience. They wonder why they can't snap out of it. Some are prescribed treatments that address the mood without ever investigating the metabolic driver beneath it. Now, this is not to suggest that all anxiety or depression is thyroid-related. Human psychology is complex, and suffering has many roots. But it is to say this: the mind and body are not separate domains. They are integrated systems. When one falters, the other compensates, often imperfectly. If your biology is struggling, your capacity for emotional regulation diminishes. That is not weakness. It is physiology. And there is something profoundly liberating about understanding that. Because shame thrives in misunderstanding. When you believe your emotional volatility is a moral failure, you compound suffering with self-judgment. But when you recognize that your endocrine system may be influencing your mood, curiosity replaces condemnation. And curiosity leads to action. If you've been feeling unlike yourself, more anxious, more withdrawn, less stable, don't dismiss it. Don't reduce it to a flaw in character. Ask a better question. Investigate the foundation. Because your emotional world may not be collapsing, it may be signaling. And the moment you stop blaming your mind for what your body is struggling to regulate, that's the moment real healing can begin.